Hello everyone and welcome back. You're watching AttilaGames. My name is Brad Young and this is the second installment in my Gatecrash standard exploration. We'll call it that anyway. In my last couple videos I spoke about how I wanted to do some testing with Unburial Rights, Reanimator style decks, and I tried putting some of those decks together. But basically what it came down to was I want to be doing these videos to showcase new cards. I want to be playing with new things. The only thing I found that the Unburial Rights decks got to make them any better, any different, was Stomping Ground, to be able to play Red and Faithless Looting more consistently. So we're going to be playing a Naya-based Zoo deck tonight. I spoke in the last videos how I wanted to try to make my Naya deck a little bit more aggressive. I wanted to try more Rancors and things like that, maybe play with Strangleroot Geists, and so on and so forth. So I started messing around with that, and I was actually reading a lot of the Patrick Chapin articles that he's been putting up over the recent weeks, and I really liked his shell of a deck. I liked the Gore Clan Rampager type strategies, so I threw one of those together. So we're going to go through the breakdown of the deck right now. I was originally testing out Experiment 1. When I saw that card I was really excited about it. I thought it was really cool, but in testing I didn't find it was really pulling its weight. So I cut the Experiment 1s out and I put in instead 4 Arbor Elves and I added an Avacyn's Pilgrim. So we have the 5 mana dorks. The reason for that is I felt it was a more powerful ability to be able to run out our 3 drops on turn 2 and cast Hell Riders more consistently, cut down on lands, so on and so forth. I don't want to be playing too many lands. We're playing 22, so playing the mana dorks allows us to keep our land count down and still be able to meet the make the higher drops on our curve. So we have the 5 mana dorks. We have 4 Stormkirk Nobles as our turn 1s. Those curve into our 4 of Strangleroot Geists, our Flinthoof Boars, because I love playing with Watchwolf, and the ability to cast it for... We can cast it on turn 2 and have a 3/3 haste on 2. That is really, really good. And that's another reason why we're playing our Arbor Elves. So we have the Watchwolf, Boar, and Strangleroot Geist on 2. We also have Scar Guildmage as another 2-drop. This is a card that really interests me. When I first read it over, it didn't seem that fantastic in this style of deck, but in testing I was playing with Call of the Conclave to be able to make my Experiment 1s bigger. And after cutting the Experiment 1s, I cut the Call of the Conclave so that we could make Thalia in the sideboard a more playable card. And I added in Scar Guildmage in its stead. The trample ability isn't that great in this deck. We don't really need that so much. We already have a lot of kind of trample, getting around creature effects. But the second ability, the pay 3 and turn a land into a 4/4 elemental, is actually really good. I think it's really good. It gives you something to do with your mana if you flood out, because we're not playing any Kessig Wolf runs or anything like that in our mana base just to be able to meet all of our colors. Playing lots of charms, and as I spoke to you before, the charms kind of make for a complex mana base. You really need to be able to have multiple colors on every turn up. So Scar Guildmage gives us something to do if we flood out or if we make it to the end game. It also pushes through things like Thragtusk and Loxodon Smiters really, really well at a fairly low cost. If we're flooding out, we don't need those lands, so we might as well just throw them at our opponent's face. So I'm actually really excited to play with this card. After that, we have 4 Gore Clan Rampager. Really, one of the 2 cards that makes this deck viable. It's the Blood Rush, gives it a creature +4/4 and trample at the cost of discarding the Rampager. I think this card is nuts. I think it's really, really good. I've been really excited to play with it, and I'd like to be able to showcase it today. It's also a 4/4 for 4, so if we start flooding out, we just need bodies. We can just play a 4-drop Trampler, and that's also really good. And again, at the top of our curve is 4 Hell Riders, just to be able to finish off our opponent. We play lots of creatures. We want things with haste. They also make our mana dorks really good. They turn the mana dorks into extra damage. We just throw everything in our opponent's face. We're playing 2 Selesnya Charms, mostly for the pump ability and the ability to kill off larger creatures. They're the only real way that we have to just eliminate a thing like a Thragtusk, anything like that. And we're playing the 4 Boros Charms. This card is awesome. I played 2 in my 75 of the Naya Midrange deck, and I loved this card. That deck isn't really the ideal home for a card like Boros Charm, even though it's very good. You can't play too many of them, but in this deck we're just playing the 4 because it can finish off our opponent with the 4 damage, makes our guys indestructible, so it gives us a protection against sweepers, against non-terminus sweepers, and it gives our guys double strike, so it just pushes through damage and kills our opponent. This card is awesome. I love this card. In addition to all this other awesome stuff that I'm really excited about playing, that I get to play Sacred Foundry and Stomping Ground in this deck. I expressed before that I think the new art in the Gatecrash lands and the Shock lands is phenomenal, and I'm just really excited that our lands are cool looking. I just really want to be playing games and looking at really beautiful looking art on my lands. So we're playing 23 lands. I said before 22. We're playing 23 lands. And only 2 basics. We're playing 2 forests just to be able to power out our early turns, our Arbor Elves, to be able to get into other things. But the mana in the deck is pretty good. We have lots of red, lots of green, lots of white, and our Arbor Elves and our Avacyn's Pilgrims, again, they help with that. So I'm going to move on to the sideboard. We're actually able to play Thalias now that I cut down on Call of the Conclave. So we're playing 4 Thalias, which push back our opponent's sweepers. They make spell-based decks much harder to interact with us in the early turns. And against a lot of decks, the First Strike body is really relevant. Some matches you just want extra creatures, so you bring in your Thalias. They don't hurt us too much. We only have a few instances, like we have 6 instants, but Thalia, we can play around that, right? Where hopefully our opponents won't be able to. Another new card that we're playing with is 2 Frontline Medics in the sideboard. It has Battalion. Creatures I control are indestructible, and the main reason I'm playing this card is to protect against Bonfire the Damned. Bonfire is really good against us in round 1. I would imagine. I haven't been bonfired yet, but I would imagine it's really good. And you can sacrifice the Frontline Medic to just nullify the bonfire. Counter target spell with X in its mana cost. So it can be brought in against Sphinx's Revelation, against bonfire decks, against any of that kind of wacky X cost things. We're playing Skullcracks. I played 3 Skullcracks in the sideboard of the other Naya deck and didn't like them. It wasn't what that deck wanted to be doing. I only had them there because it was a new and shiny card, and I wanted to have new and shiny things in my playtest videos. But it didn't cut it. This deck, however, can actually make use of the Skullcracks, because whereas the old deck, it mattered that our opponents were still drawing cards, and in this version all we care about is them not gaining life. We don't want our opponents to gain any life whatsoever. We want them to play fair. We want them to play with 20 life or less because of their shock lands, and Skullcrack gets us there. It's also a good way to kill off Planeswalkers and things like that. We have 2 Planeswalkers, speaking of which, in the sideboard. Garruk Relentless. I was toying around with having these guys in the main deck, but I wanted to keep my curve low. I didn't want too many 4-drops. We already have Hell Riders. So they were relegated to the sideboard. I still think he's a great card. He could be main deckable, depending on what you're playing against. But for the sake of these videos, he's going to be our sideboard card for control. And we can bring him in against various aggro and mid-range matchups where we feel like we need to be killing their guys or just making a steady stream of attacker, blocker, wolves. And last but not least, we have the full 4 set of Pillar Flames. They're great against Pyreheart Wolves, they're great against opposing Stranglroot Geists and Jaros Messengers, and all the cards that we need to die that are tiny and going to get in our way, and that are going to try to race us. So that's the main deck, that's the sideboard. I'm stoked to be playing this deck. I really want to just start Boros charming people, so let's jump into the games and see what this pile of magnificent junk is capable of doing.